Okay. Oops. Hi everyone. So I'm glad you all could come. This is going to be a slightly different format from yesterday's, which was kind of like videos. I'm presenting in front of you. It's kind of a lot, so as they say in lower school, polish your golden listening ears because we have a lot of listening to do. So for my senior project, I chose to pursue the study of herbalism, and over the course of the past 6 months, I've had the wonderful opportunity to work with 2 local herbalists in the Santa Fe community. One is part of the Waldorf community. It's Kais Bello, who's the wonderful wife of Mr. Ryan, and a very dear friend of hers, Zoraida Adams, and both of whom are incredible herbalists, and I've been really lucky to be able to spend some time with them and kind of hear about their personal experiences and have them help me along my herbal journey and understand what herbalism is and the importance it kind of holds in our modern world. So the intention with this presentation today is kind of to emulate the process that I've undertaken over the course of the past 6 months. Now, of course, I've had 6 months to work on it, and we only have like 45 minutes, so it's going to be a consolidated version, but I'm just going to kind of walk you through a consolidated version of kind of my process. So my project is very skills-based. I learned all that I've had through a variety of different avenues, through reading, through conversation, and most importantly, through personal connection with the plants. And so kind of in an idealized world, we'd be sitting outside in the garden and I'd be walking you through all the plants. I can't exactly do that, so I try to bring you the next closest thing, which is kind of the herbalism slideshow and some of my like crafts and potions over here. So yeah, through all these different avenues, I've kind of formed my interpretation of what herbalism is, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. So I'm basically going to start with a brief introduction to herbalism and its relevance to our modern world, because before we can get into my specific experience, we kind of have to define some terms and understand what exactly herbalism is. Okay, so herbalism is the art and science of using herbs for promoting health and preventing and treating illness. And it's persisted as the world's primary form of medicine since the very dawn of time, with a written history more than 5,000 years old. But most of the traditions actually stem back to a time prior to written records. And so a lot of the information that we have today was collected and preserved orally over time through the generations. And so you can tell that herbalism is deeply intertwined with humanity. And this is because, sadly, disease and injury have plagued humanity since the dawn of time. And so very early on in our history, or rather our prehistory, humans realized that if they wanted to continue to move forward and survive as a species, they were going to have to find some way to combat disease and injury. And at this point in our history, we were living entirely off the earth, so plants and animals were providing for all of our basic needs. And so, of course, by extension, we started thinking, why can't we use plants to provide for our healing needs as well? And so that's kind of what led to the origin of herbalism. So herbalism emerged in its most rudimentary form as a way to promote bodily health. And through the process of trial and error, people identified the plants that were local to their region and used them to form the first pharmaceuticals, which is basically a fancy term for herbal collections. So this is essentially the origin of herbalism. Now, of course, over time, cultures developed more complex herbal traditions. So they would have whole collections of herbs, they would know which plant was used for what specific purposes, how you harvest it, how you dry it, how you incorporate it into medicines. And so with the rise of these developed, more complex herbal collections comes the rise of people whose task it is to preserve this medicinal knowledge. And that gave rise to the first herbalists, or the first healers. So each culture kind of has its own unique herbal traditions that have been passed down through the centuries. Like I was saying earlier, a lot of our ancient knowledge of herbalism stems from a time prior to written records. And so a lot of the knowledge was passed down orally from generation to generation, from one herbalist to the next. And so because of this, there's this like long tradition of secrecy and magic associated with herbalism. So because if you have the right herb and you know how to use it, you can literally cure someone's life, you can prolong their life. And so that's kind of magic in and of itself to many people. And so for that reason, people were kind of secretive about preserving their traditions. And they've been very effective. Again, a lot of the traditions that we have today stem from ancient times, and they've been preserved orally through the centuries. And so it's definitely worked. So kind of where we live right now, it seems that a lot of the ancient knowledge is kind of obscured by modern Western medicine. But to this day, 75% of the world still relies primarily upon herbal remedies. And even in the US, homeopathic medicine is a wildly popular alternative to Western medicine. And again, many of these traditions stem from more ancient plant-based remedies and practices. So here in Santa Fe in particular, we live in an area where herbal medicine is very popular. And this is due kind of to the alternative reputation of the Southwest, of Santa Fe, and particularly the Waldorf community. So here in Santa Fe, Waldorf community, we kind of are exposed to lots of alternative practices. And so because of this, many of you may already be familiar with the term herbalism, or you will at least kind of have heard it before. I know that in my own experience, kind of growing up as a kid in Waldorf, I remember we had a basket in my kindergarten that was full of all these different herbs and potions. And so whenever you would get sick, you wouldn't be given Advil or cough syrup or anything. You'd be given something from the little tincture jar, and I remember it smelled very strongly of plants, and sometimes we didn't have plants in it. And so even from an early age, me and my classmates were exposed to this idea that there is alternative paths to medicine, and that you can use plants kind of to help promote bodily health. And then I was exposed to this kind of in my own house too. My mom has a book of homeopathic remedies that's really big and thick, and she would thumb through it whenever me and my siblings were sick. And also a lot of parents at the school were kind of involved in alternative medicine practices like acupuncture, etc. But I wasn't really exposed to herbalism until I came here. And I was exposed to herbalism on Vallecitos, which is the trip that we take at the beginning of the year. So I was in the back with a classmate of mine, and we were behind Mr. Ryan and Senora Castilla, and they stopped in front of us, and they, because Mr. Ryan said he wanted to harvest some rose hips. I brought them too, so you can see them. Basically, these are the dried version, but these are the little buds that come from the rose plant, and you can use them to make tea. Of course, I'd never heard of this before, so I was super intrigued, and I went up. I kind of totally eavesdropped, but it was, I think it's okay now because it got me to where I am. But I was like, Mr. Ryan, what are you making with those? And he kind of exposed me to kind of the healing properties of rose hips, and that was kind of my introduction to herbalism. And then over the course of the rest of the trip, whenever I was on a walk, I would go spend some time with him, and he would tell me some more about the different healing properties of different plants we came upon. And so that was kind of my introduction to herbalism. And I got home from my trip, and I remember telling my mom, I really want to learn about what Mr. Ryan is doing. But then it was junior year, and I had to do all the other school stuff. So then when it came time to choose my senior project, I was like, I know exactly what I want to do. I want to do exactly what Mr. Ryan was talking about. And so he was my inspiration for this project. And it's pretty cool that I got to work with his wife too, because then it came all full circle. So yeah, that's kind of my introduction to what herbalism is. And now you kind of know a little bit about why it's important. And so with that, I'm kind of going to move on to the next step of my project, which is my personal experience. So for my project, I decided to embark upon an investigation of herbs here in the Santa Fe area. And I chose to do this by doing the one plant per month method. So I basically chose to focus on one plant here in the Southwest from 3 different angles. So the first is the scientific angle. And basically, I researched the botany, or the science behind the plant, and it's the plant family, give it a scientific description of it, its habitat, its conditions, all that, so I could get kind of a thorough understanding of the plant in scientific terms. And then I moved on to kind of the historical side. So in this, I decided to study the plant through the context of each of the different inhabitants who lived here throughout the ages. So I kind of started with the indigenous people, then I moved into the settlers, and then kind of the modern herbalists of today. So the intention with this historical angle was kind of twofold. First, I really love history, so I wanted to kind of incorporate that in somehow. And then secondly, and kind of more importantly, given that herbalism is kind of a tradition that's stretched back for millennia, and given that right now I'm standing on Tewa land that was inhabited by people long before I came here, I kind of wanted to pay homage to the cultures who have come before and the traditions that have come before, because as an herbalist, I'm just one in a long line of people who have studied the plants before me. And I've learned a lot of what I have through personal connection with the plants, but I've also learned it through kind of the elders in the community and everything. And so I wanted to pay homage to those cultures by kind of talking about the different people who have lived here before and their herbal traditions and how they got me to where I am at. So that's kind of the historical angle. And then the final angle was the practical application. So I outlined kind of the medicinal and also the culinary and cosmetic purposes of the plant, and then I compiled all my information together to make a medicine. So this is kind of cool because, again, I'm spending a whole month kind of researching the plant, researching its medicinal properties, and then I finally get to do a hands-on project where I make the medicine myself. So yeah, the intention with doing these 3 different angles is kind of to forge a personal connection with the plant. And this is the single most important thing that I've learned about herbalism. If there's anything I can impart to you today, I want you to know that herbalism is all about forging a personal connection with the plant. So my first meeting with my mentor, I remember we were like walking and I was like, well, I want to do herbalism, but I'm not entirely sure what I want to do. I'm not sure like what even herbalism is, like what do I do? And the direction she gave me was, she's like, I can give you lots of different interpretations of it is, I can give you lots of experience, but at the end of the day, it's all about forging your own personal connection with the plants. And so I walked away from that meeting being like, okay, the rest of my project has to be centered off of that. And so this project that I developed was centered off of that idea, forging a connection with the plants. And yeah, so I got to do that through all those different angles of researching, writing, etc. And then I compiled all of my work into kind of an herbal notebook. So that's the other thing my mentor told me on the first day. She's like, because herbalism is all about a personal connection with the plants, you really want to kind of chronicle your work with the plants in a kind of a notebook or a diary of sorts. And so I had literally just grabbed this on my way out of the house as my sister. So I was like, hey, can I take this? I think I'm gonna need to take some notes. And it's ended up becoming my herbal journal because I wrote down kind of my first experiences with the plant that day. And then ever since then, I put all my research, and it's totally become a journal. It's got like my scrawled, messy writing, and it's not only got my observations, but it's also got my feelings and everything that I've got associated with that too, because again, it's kind of a personal experience. And so this has totally become my first herbal notebook, and I totally filled all the pages. So my next chapter with all this is I'm gonna have to get a new notebook. But it was pretty scrawled and messy, so I didn't want to turn that in as my final draft. So I translated it all into this version right here. There's also one on the board anyway. It's got my written work, it's got artistic drawings and everything. It's 95 pages long. So in an idealized world, I would like walk you through all of it, but I know that would be like immensely just too time consuming, and I don't think it would be that entertaining because it's been really interesting for me, but I will tell you that even I can't like sit down and read it all in one setting because it's kind of a lot of information. So yeah. Given that, however, considering that's what I've worked on for the past 6 months, I do kind of want to pay homage to that, and so I'm just kind of going to walk you through a synopsized version of the herbal notebook. And I'm just going to walk you through my 6 plants that I focused on from the 3 different angles. Again, consolidated version, don't worry. It's not going to be 95 pages, but it is a bit long. But I do want to share kind of what I've learned. So yeah, okay. So my first plant was Yerba Mansa. And the official name is Anapopsis californiae. Its alternate names are Anapopsis californiae, lizard's tail, quique de lizard, swamp root, bavisa, and Yerba del Manso. So Yerba Mansa is a native perennial plant of southwestern North America, which favors alkaline or moist conditions, such as those found along rivers, bogs, and swamps in the southwestern high desert. Visually, it's pretty distinctive. It's got a conical shape, white bracts, and florlets and succulent leaves. So there's kind of 2 traditional periods that you can see it in. There's, in the summer, Yerba Mansa is characterized by large green leaves and white cone-shaped blossoms, so the picture that's on up there. In the autumn, Yerba Mansa is characterized by yellow or red leaves and red and brown blossoms. So I actually met Yerba Mansa in the fall, and so this will always kind of be my image of her. It's kind of her in her autumn finery. But this is kind of the more common image, so I gave them both, so you can kind of see an image of them both. Anyway. So again, that's just kind of a brief synopsis of the scientific. In my book, I went to a lot more detail, the plant family, etc., but this is just kind of the brief synopsis. Anyway, the next one. Usage. So Yerba Mansa is incredibly important medicinally, and it's widely regarded for its close association with many different systems of the body, including the digestive, respiratory, urinary, and circulatory systems. So these are all very different systems. We're talking about the stomach, we're talking about the lungs, we're talking about the blood. The fact that one plant is associated with all of these different systems goes to show how important medicinally Yerba Mansa is. Also, Yerba Mansa has a wide range of properties. It's astringent, antiseptic, antibacterial, antifungal, anti-inflammatory, disinfectant, and tonic. And so, due to the fact that it has such a wide range of healing properties and that it's associated with so many different systems, again, goes to show how important Yerba Mansa is. Medicinally speaking, in medicine, yerba mansa is usually used in dried form. So you harvest the root, you dry it, and then you can crush or powder it and incorporate it to a variety of different medicines. We're talking from teas and tinctures to salves and etc. But it's generally used in dried form. All right, history. So this is my favorite section. This is also really the longest section. So again, I'm going to try to be synopsized. So yerba mansa is one of the most powerful medicinal plants of the American Southwest. And because of this, it's got a long tradition of usage by human inhabitants, which began with indigenous, was picked up by the Spanish curanderos, and continues to be utilized to this very day by modern herbalists. So yerba mansa grows as far west as the California coast, as far east as Kansas, as far north as the Canadian border, and as far south almost as Guatemala. So this is a wide expanse of territory. And prior to the arrival of the Europeans, this territory was inhabited by a wide variety of different indigenous tribes. And they all identified yerba mansa, called it by a different name, used it for slightly different purposes. And I really wanted to pay homage to all these different cultures. So this was my first plant. So I totally went and I researched all 15 tribes. Well, there was more, but I tried to get as many as I could, and I got 15 tribes. And I totally did everything. I was like, okay, what was the name? What did they use it for? How did they? And after that, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to consolidate this down because this is just too much. Anyway, I can't go into the 15 cultures right now, so I'm just going to focus again on just the Southwest because this is kind of the project centering around kind of the Southwest and where we're living now. So yeah, I'm going to just kind of start with the tribes who lived in the American Southwest, such as the Navajo, the Apache, the Hopi, and the various different branches of the Pueblo people. They lived in a territory abundant with yerba mansa. And as a result, the plant was extremely important in the herbal traditions of almost every single tribe in the Southwest. And they used it for a variety of different purposes. They used primarily the root in dried form, and they would incorporate it into different medicines to treat a variety of different conditions, such as vernal conditions, circulatory issues, and respiratory problems. Again, these are wildly different issues. We're talking about vernal conditions such as syphilis, to circulatory issues such as hemorrhoids, to respiratory problems such as colds and flus. The fact that, again, one plant is used for all this goes to show how important it is. Yeah, so that's kind of indigenous. They used yerba mansa for many uses, yeah. All right, next kind of were the Spaniards. So I'm sure you kind of know a little bit about New Mexican history, or kind of the history of the European colonization, especially the Spaniards here in the Southwest. First come the conquistadors, then come the missionaries, and then kind of come the more common people. And along with the common people, they kind of interact with indigenous, and they kind of form a cross culture, which is kind of the burgeoning Hispanic American community. And along with this arises the curanderos, and these are the traditional healers of the Hispanic American communities. They kind of combined elements of mystical Catholicism with local indigenous traditions, and they were really centering around healing of both the body and the spirit. And they really used herbs. So yerba mansa was really important to them. As soon as the curanderos came here, they were exposed to indigenous traditions, and yerba mansa quickly became an important part of their pharmaceuticals. And actually, to this day, curanderos continue to kind of permeate the culture. A lot of rural places in Mexico and also here in the Southwest continue to use a lot of these traditions that come from the curanderos, and they don't use kind of Western medicine. They use more of these ancient traditions. So a couple of recipes from this ancient time, or from not really ancient, but a couple hundred years, have been passed down and continue to be utilized today. So the kind of important thing that came with the Spaniards in regard to yerba mansa is that they were the ones who gave the plant the name yerba mansa. So yerba mansa literally means in Spanish healing herb. Now it's given this name not because it's used as a tranquilizer, but rather because yerba mansa is a desert plant that grows near water. So it's kind of an oasis plant, which means that it's used to both the dry conditions of the desert and the wet conditions of the water. The interesting thing is that yerba mansa, as a plant, is used to treat both dry and wet conditions of the body. So when talking about different parts of the body and different medicinal conditions, there are lots of different ways to talk about it. But one of the ways is talking about dry conditions and wet conditions, and generally one plant is more associated with one than the other. The fact that this plant is associated with both, then again, goes to show how important it is. It's also beautiful because it represents that idea that it is a desert plant that grows near water, and so it kind of represents the sacred connection between water and fire. And its growing conditions kind of emulate the conditions it has on the body. So, the Spaniards were the one who gave it its name, and then kind of medicinally speaking, they kind of incorporated a lot of indigenous traditions and they used the dried root, and they used it kind of in a lot of different varieties to make, a lot of different medicines to treat different issues such as the vernal conditions and the circulatory issues, and etc. So that's the Spaniards. Then along come the modern herbalists. Oh, oops, one thing. So there are a number of different specific treatments that have withstood the test of time. As I was saying, a lot of these curandero traditions have continued to be emulated today, and we still see that in our culture. And here in New Mexico in particular, there are two important remedies that were curandero traditions that we still continue to use today, and one is a gargle for respiratory issues. So you just have a little bit of yerba mansa, you just have some water, you gargle it, and it's really effective for respiratory issues. And the other one is a salve for external injuries. So this is made by some of the herb with some natural oils and beeswax, and doesn't incorporate any, standardized medicine. Or standardized Western medicine. It's just totally a traditional practice that stems back from a couple hundred years ago, and it's totally still used today in kind of rural communities here in New Mexico as well. So, yeah. Now moving on to the modern herbalists. So, yerba mansa continues to remain one of the most important herbs in traditional herbal medicine today. It was utilized in standard Western medicine until the mid-20th century, and then it was kind of replaced by the common drugs used today, but it continues to form an essential part of homeopathic or traditional herbalist approaches to medicine. And yeah, again, it's incorporated in a variety of different medicines to treat a variety of different ailments, but they're kind of generally falling in the category that we spoke about before. All right, so my medicine for this one. So my first medicine I made was a yerba mansa infusion. So an infusion is kind of one of the simpler, more basic herbal remedies. Basically, if you know how to make a tea, you know how to make an infusion. You just incorporate some of the dried herbs with water. You steep it for about 10 minutes, then you drain the herbs out, and you're left with the infusion. So a tea you generally have like the day you make it, but the nice thing with an infusion is you can put it in a jar and you can store it for like a little while. I have some right here too, so it's pretty cool. It's good for respiratory issues. So you just have a little dosage per day, and you could have like more of a stronger or bigger cup if you're kind of feeling symptoms. Again, it's really good for respiratory problems. So if you're feeling a cold or flu coming on, you just have to have some of this, and it makes you feel better. I've tried it. It does work. Okay, next plant. So the next plant is Osha, and its official name is Ligusticum porteri. Its alternate names are Porter's lovage, Colorado cough root, chuchupate, Indian parsley, and bear medicine. Osha is one of the most widely revered herbs in the American Southwest, known for its legendary medicinal properties in healing all manner and variety of physical and spiritual ailments. It's a perennial member of the parsley family, native to the American West, where it favors moist conditions and high elevations. So its appearance is kind of similar to most members of the parsley family. It's got irregularly divided basal leaves, large brown hairy roots, hollow stems, and it's topped by an umbrella-like shaped cluster of tiny white flowers and seed umbels. And it's got a really extensive root system of the plant. If you go out harvesting, you can get a whole basket full of roots coming from one plant, which is pretty cool. So, yes, the thing with Osha is that it's notoriously hard to identify, and it's often confused with poisonous hemlock. So this, as you can imagine, is a big problem. We're talking about a really important medicinal herb, and we're talking about a very poisonous herb. So if you get them confused and you use the poison when you're supposed to be using the herbal plant and you give it to someone as a medicine, it could be very bad. So you really have to pay attention to the distinctions. There are 3 ways to tell these herbs apart, and you really need to focus on them. So the first is the scents. So Osha has a very strong, pungent odor, and poisonous hemlock does not have any odor. Secondly is roots. Osha roots are large, brown, and hairy, and hemlock roots are purple, hairless, and considerably smaller. And the third and final distinction are the seeds. So Osha seeds are compressed, and hemlock has non-compressed seeds. So, yeah. All right, usage. So Osha is incredibly important not only medicinally, but also culinarily and spiritually. So Osha is incredibly important medicinally. It has a wide range of healing properties. It's a stimulant, an immune booster, an antiseptic, and an antibacterial, and for this reason it can be used for a wide variety of ailments such as respiratory problems, digestive stimulation, visual complaints, immune boosters, altitude sickness, antiseptic infections, bites and stings, muscular tensions, and viral infections. Osha also has culinary properties. You can make a seasoning from the dried leaves and seeds, which has kind of a potent flavor that kind of tastes like parsley, and it's pretty good. And then kind of Osha has incredible spiritual importance. So in many Native American cultures, the plant is a ceremonial protection against evil. And this is embodied by the indigenous tradition of wearing Osha to ward off snakes. So snakes were traditionally seen as portents of evil. And you would wear Osha root to dissuade snakes from coming, and then therefore to dissuade their negative energy. Simultaneously, you would wear Osha to attract bears. Bears are known as kind of portents of goodwill. So you would wear Osha to ward off the snakes and negativity, and attract the bears and positivity. So, yeah. All right, the history. So Osha has long been considered the most powerful and important herbal medicine in American Southwest. And it's played an important role in the herbal medicinal folklore of the indigenous groups of the American Southwest, revered for both its medicinal and spiritual properties. So each of the different tribes in the Southwest kind of knew it by a slightly different name and called it by a slightly different purpose. So the Hopi were actually the ones who gave the plant the name bear root. So bears are known to be attracted to Osha. So Osha emerges in spring, right after the traditional hibernation period. Bears wake up, are very, very hungry, and the first thing they see is Osha. And Osha seeds are actually really good for bears to eat, and they give them a lot of energy. So there's a strong connection between bears being attracted to Osha. And the Hopi were the first to kind of tune into this connection, and so they gave the plant the name bear root. And it sparked this kind of legendary connection between the plant and the animal that persists to this very day. All right, similarly, the Hopi had some neighbors, which were the Apache, and the Apache called the plant deer root because they recognized that the deer were super into Osha, and so they gave it a slightly different name. And then there were the Coahuila Indians in the Mojave Desert between California and Arizona, so they're not exactly right here, but they're close enough. They were the ones who gave the plant the name snake root because they realized that snakes really did not like Osha. And so, again, you see these three different tribes calling the plant a slightly different name, but again, recognizing that the importance it has in forging a connection between different species of animals. So each of these tribes, again, had a slightly different name. They used it for slightly different purposes, but for the most part, they kind of used it for, medicinally, they used it for similar purposes. So they used it primarily for respiratory or immune support and also digestive support. So you would make teas from the roots to combat stomach ailments and respiratory problems. Also, they recognized the spiritual importance of Osha. They used it in smudging practices, incorporated it into medicine pouches, and again used it kind of to attract the spirit of the bear. Then along came the Spanish settlers. So again, something similar happened where they didn't have any prior exposure to Osha, so they kind of just they just adapted a lot of the indigenous traditions. And they followed an indigenous practice of harvesting the roots and using them to concoct a variety of medicines. So they brewed Osha root into teas and infusions, which were used as immune support, respiratory treatments, and stomach complaints. The kind of important thing that came along with the Spaniards is that they realized that using fresh roots is more potent than using dried roots. So fresh roots is better for more serious complaints, and dried roots is better for more common everyday ailments. So then there's the modern herbalists. So Osha continues to be regarded as the most powerful plant in the Southwest for herbal medicine, and it's one of the best treatments for viral infections, and it's most effective when used at the initial stages of infection when energy and mood are down. Something interesting is that in recent years, a correlation has been found between traditional indigenous practices and Chinese medicine. So it turns out there's a plant very similar to Osha, which is native to China. And Chinese healers have been using it for millennia for much the same purpose as indigenous healers have here in North America with Osha. So it's kind of cool to see that, despite these cultures being halfway across the world from each other, not really having very much contact, they're kind of tuning into this kind of greater herbal knowledge, and that you're using a similar plant for similar things. It's pretty cool. So yeah. All right. So for this, I made Osha root honey. So again, one of the most important healing properties of Osha is that it's really great for respiratory problems. Honey is also really great for respiratory problems. I'm sure you've been told in your childhood when you feel sick, someone's like, oh, have a cup of tea with some honey in it. That's because honey really is good for soothing your throat. And Osha really is good for soothing your throat. So what better kind of way to incorporate them together and to make Osha root honey? It's very simple to make. You just crush up some Osha and you incorporate it into honey. And you have it right here. You just, again, you can incorporate it, you can store it for as much time as you want. You just put a little bit of honey. First of all, you can put a little bit of honey in your tea every day just to provide a general immune support. And then you can increase the dosage if you're feeling sick. So yeah, you don't remove the Osha root. You want to keep it in there so you can get the medicinal value of it. Okay. Elderberry. So this is the next plant. Its official name is Sandbuscus nigra. It's got a lot of alternate names. So it's either known as blue, Arizona, New Mexico desert, or Mexican elderberry. It's also known as Valle del Saco, and it's also known as tapiro. So elderberry is one of the most important plants in herbal traditions across the globe because it was one of the earliest plants cultivated by humans, and ever since then has been revered for millennia as an incredibly important plant for culinary and medicinal properties. So it's a perennial member of the muskroot family. It says muskrat on there, but oh well. Muskroot is what it's supposed to be. And it tends to favor riparian areas such as streams or ditches and washes. So elderberry generally takes on the form of a shrub. The plants are generally comprised of a range of leaflets, numbering between 5 and 9. Leaflets are generally kind of green. In the spring, the plant is characterized by the influence of fragrant white or cream-colored flowers, and then in the summer, these ripen into globular berry-like fruit, which are known as elderberries, and they have a lot of medicinal value. So there are 2 different species of elderberries native to New Mexico. First, we have red elderberries, and then we have black elderberries. So red elderberries are native to northern New Mexico. They're characterized by their red berries. The thing is, these berries have high concentrations of hydrochloric acid, and so they're actually toxic to consume directly. So you can only have them when they're brewed into something. They have great medicinal value, but you cannot have them raw. In contrast, black elderberries, which are native to southern and central New Mexico and are characterized by their black elderberries, are totally safe for human consumption. And so you can have them raw, and you can also have them in medicines. So, yeah. Usage. So elderberry elder plants are extremely important medicinally and are used for a wide variety of ailments. It's most commonly used as a general immune booster and preventative, so it's great to have in the fall and winter leading up to flu season. It's also an effective treatment for respiratory ailments such as colds, flus, and influenza. And it's also good for general inflammations ranging from toothaches to arthritis. Elder also has a wide range of culinary uses throughout history. So from as far back as the Stone Age up until the present, elderberries have been consumed in a variety of ways. You can either have them directly, you can either eat them raw as a healthy snack. You can't have the red elderberries, but you can have the black elderberries. Or you can incorporate them into baked goods, jams, and here in America we have a tradition of elderberry wine. So in the rural Ozark Mountains of Missouri, there's a tradition of elderberry wine and elderberry flower fritters. So elderberry wine is just wine made from elderberries. Elderberry flower fritters is just basically you dip the elderberry or the elderflower into an egg, like egg wash, then you fry it up in oil and you serve it as a fritter. And so you can go to the Ozarks and they'll just give you an after dinner entertainment with their elderberry flower fritters and their elderberry wine. So yeah. And then elderberry also has value in handicrafts. The bark makes a really potent magenta dye, which is really great for dyeing things, as you can see up there. It's dyed that pretty wool. All right, history. So, as I was mentioning earlier, elder was one of the first plants to be cultivated by humankind during the Stone Age, and ever since then, it's been widely revered in herbal traditions throughout Europe, Asia, and the Americas. So there's records from ancient Rome that detail the importance of elderberries. Elderberries were considered a symbol of health and prosperity, and it was believed that if an ancient Roman had an elderberry tree, they would have a long and prosperous life and they would never get sick. And then that kind of tradition kind of continued through the Middle Ages and into more of the present, in which elderberry, it's not known to cure your life forever, but it is known to have medicinal value. Elderberries were also incredibly important here in North America. So elder is an extremely important plant in the herbal folklore of the indigenous people of the American continent, as far east as New England and as far west as California. The indigenous tribes of the Southwest recognized the medicinal importance of elderberry. They used it for culinary, either in dried form or they cooked it into baked goods. And then medicinally, they used elder for a variety of purposes. They made teas from the flowers for immune support, and as a treatment against colds and flus, they made salves and poultices to treat sore muscles. They made warm infusions as a diaphoretic and stimulant, and they made cold infusions as a diuretic. So then along came the European settlers. So in contrast to Osha and Yerba Mansa, they had prior experience with elderberries, and so they kind of incorporated European traditions with indigenous traditions. So in keeping with the European traditions, they used elderberry as an anti-inflammatory, antiviral treatment for immune and respiratory support, but they adopted an indigenous tradition of using elderberries for more external injuries. And then came the modern herbalists. So elder continues to be utilized as an important medicinal plant in herbal traditions today. It's kind of most widely regarded as an immune booster, and it's really effective for children between 1 to 10. So it's kind of nice to have a plant that's really good for all ages and that's really good for little children. And due to this, elderberry is kind of making the transition from more a homeopathic remedy to kind of more it's being incorporated into standardized medicine. If you go to the pharmacy now and you go look for immune boosters, cough syrup, whatever, you'll see that elderberry is listed as an ingredient. This is because elderberry has great immune support, and herbalists have always known this, but standard Western medicine is kind of getting into that now. All right, so given that elderberry is kind of most important as a kind of immune booster, and it's kind of incorporated in cough syrups and everything, for my recipe, I made elderberry syrup. So this was the first remedy I made with Zoraida, and it's kind of a little bit more complicated because it's just got more steps. And basically, you just gather your ingredients first. You need a variety of different herbs. You need ginger, you need cinnamon, you need cardamom. Then you need some dried elderberries. Then you get some honey and water and some alcohol. You would use alcohol just kind of for preserving properties. Then you just stew all the ingredients except for the alcohol together. It's kind of like making a broth. You just wait for it kind of to seep in, and then eventually you take it off with low heat after like an hour or whatever. You drain it out, and you pour it into a little bottle, and you've got elderberry syrup. So I actually made it up in Washington when I was visiting my grandparents, which is really cool because I was using elderberries that are native to there. So elderberries are not only native to the Southwest, they're also native to up there, and so I used a specific species up there. So I didn't get to you can't bring liquid on a plane. People just don't like that. So I wasn't able to bring it with me. But it's being utilized up there by my cousins. And they're little, so it's pretty cool to be able to have something that's, again, a medicine that's actually in usage by little kids. And it totally tastes like cough syrup. I remember having it and I was like, wow, I just like made cough syrup. So it's kind of cool. All right, so the next plant is wild roses. The official name is Rosa. There's lots of alternate names: pasture rose, prairie rose, dog rose, eglantine, sweetbriar, and Scotch rose. So wild roses are one of, if not the most famous plant species of all time, widely revered by herbalists and laymen alike. So you don't have to be an herbalist to know what a rose is and to recognize its importance, essentially. There are 100 different species of true wild roses in the world today, 20 of which are native to North America. And so each species kind of varies in size, shape, structure, color, but they're all kind of characterized by similar botanical structure. So they all possess a single row of petals. All the leaves are rose pinnate, and the color of the flowers generally tends to be kind of pastel colored. All right, usage. So roses have numerous health-related benefits for both the physical and the spiritual body, and all of the different parts of the rose are used for different purposes. So rose petals are antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, astringent, nervine, and nutritive, making them the perfect treatment for many complaints. Then rose leaves are anti-astringent and antibacterial, so they're really great. You can make tinctures, salves, and balms to kind of treat open wounds because of the antibacterial qualities. Rose hips also have lots of health benefits. They're antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, cognitive, and nutritive. Also, rose hips have 24 times the amount of vitamin C than citrus fruits, and they also contain substantial quantities of vitamins A, B, and K. So they're a really great nutritive treatment. Wild roses also have culinary usage. You can make you can incorporate rose hips into jellies, and you can incorporate them into vinegars and teas, as Mr. Ryan told me. And you can have rose petals actually have a nice flavor, so you can incorporate them into salads if you want to kind of have edible flowers in there. They also provide interesting flavor. And then wild roses they're widely regarded for their cosmetic benefits. So petals and hips are incorporated into facial sprays, perfumes, and waters to provide fragrance and vitality. And they're also incorporated into skincare products such as lotions, creams, and salves to act as both moisturizers and purifiers. History. So Wild roses are far and away the most widely revered plant species in herbal traditions across the world, and they're recognized by almost anybody. There's a long tradition here in the Western kind of world of a rose being a symbol of love and romance. And this kind of stems from medieval traditions and the ideas of courtly love and the troubadours and etc. These are kind of ancient traditions that have kind of permeated our culture today. I mean, there's still a reason that we gave each other roses on Valentine's Day. Also, wild roses are really important here in North America. So the Native American tribes who lived in the Southwest recognized the medicinal, culinary, and spiritual importance of wild roses. They made, medicinally speaking, they made root teas to treat respiratory ailments, petal infusions to soothe nerves, rose leaf salves to treat external injuries, and rose hip teas to serve as immune boosters. And they also used roses for culinary purposes such as herbal teas, vinegars, jellies, and salsas. And then roses were also regarded for their symbolic spiritual importance as tokens of life and vitality. So again, in the West, it's generally associated with love and romance, but here in indigenous traditions, it's seen as a token of life and vitality. And so there's this tradition of putting dried rose petals near a cradle, near a marriage bed, and near a deathbed, because all of these are like different transitions in your life, and you would put the roses around to kind of signal you into the next stage of your life. There's also an indigenous tradition, kind of more in the Northwest with the nez percé, because the Southwest the tribes don't do this, but they have cradle boards for their babies, and they decorate these cradle boards with symbols of roses. And the idea is that if you put a rose around them from an early age, this will give them a long and prosperous life because they'll be surrounded by vitality and life. All right, so that's kind of the indigenous. Then came the settlers. Again, similar to elderberry, they had prior exposure to roses and then incorporated again European traditions with indigenous traditions. Let's see. Yeah, so again, they used kind of teas and tinctures for respiratory ailments, also digestive ailments, and they also could make creams for external remedies too. And then they, sorry, I totally don't have this in my notes. They adapted the indigenous usage using it, making leaf teas for external injuries, and there was also an indigenous tradition of making petal baths, which were really good for digestive issues and for menstrual issues and for reproductive issues. And the Europeans did not have this prior experience, so they adopted those indigenous traditions. All right, so that's kind of the Spaniards. Then today, wild roses continue to be regarded as important plants in herbal traditions today. You kind of use them for much the same, for some reasons. You can make teas from the rose petals and buds. You can make salves to treat external injuries. You can make lotions and balms for cosmetic purposes, and you can make petal infusions and baths to ease digestive and female reproductive issues. So for my recipe, I made rose elixir. And I also made this with dried. To do this, you just you get dried herbs and you make a menstruum. So this is the first time I made a menstruum. Menstruum is basically a liquid base. So you incorporate alcohol and water in a ratio, in this case was 1:1. Then you would make that menstruum, you incorporate it with the dried herbs, you add some honey for flavoring, and then you just let it sit for like 4 to 6 weeks. You strain it out, and then you're left with rose elixir. So you kind of use it like rescue remedy. You have it whenever you're kind of feeling like you're a little down, again, physically or emotionally, or kind of spiritually. Also, roses are known to be a great heart remedy, also, not only emotionally, but also physically. So whenever you're feeling heart sore anyway, again, physical or emotional, just take a little elixir, and it will make you feel a little better. You just take a little droplet, you just put a little bit in, and I will say from personal experience, it really does work wonders. Okay. We're almost there, guys, I promise. Okay. Here's Arnica. So Arnica, the official name is Arnica. The alternate names are leopardsbane, mountain daisy, mountain tobacco, and wolfsbane. So Arnica is one of the most medicinally revered plants in the world, praised for its healing properties of body and mind. It's a perennial member of the daisy family native to North America, and it favors moist areas with substantial soil moisture and water contact. It's visually very distinctive. It's got little bright yellow flowers, which essentially look like miniature sunflowers. It's got acine fruit, and it's got a opposing leaf structure. Okay, usage. So medicinally, Arnica is used primarily as an external remedy used to treat external bodily injuries. So you can make creams, poultices, and tinctures. It also possesses immune boosting properties. So if you combine it with other immune enhancing herbs, such as rose hips or elderberries, it can make a really great immune boosting supplement. And then Arnica is also a potent cardiovascular stimulant and vacillator. It's also got some value as a cosmetic. It turns out that Arnica oil is a really effective hair treatment, so you incorporate it into shampoos and conditioners, and then it's also well regarded for its sensual and aromatic properties. And so you can incorporate it into perfumes, makeups, and other forms of cosmetics. So Arnica has long been regarded as one of the most potent external remedies. And then the southwestern tribes also recognized the aromatic importance of Arnica and incorporated into culinary dishes and cosmetics to provide a distinctive flavor to both cooking and fashion. Then along came the Spanish settlers. Again, they had prior exposure to Arnica, and so they incorporated their European traditions with their indigenous traditions. And then mostly they just kind of used it primarily as an external remedy because this was both what the Europeans and the indigenous were using it for. Yes. And then the modern herbalists. So Arnica continues to be revered as one of the most important plants in homeopathic herbal traditions. It's widely regarded as one of the most effective topical treatments for bruising, swelling, and other external physical pain. It's used both for common everyday ailments and also for more serious conditions, kind of such as arthritis. The other interesting thing too is that similar to kind of elderberry, Arnica is kind of making its way into standard Western medicine. If you go looking for creams to treating external injuries in the pharmacy, you will find Arnica listed as an ingredient because it's really good. So given that, that's what I made for my recipe. I made Arnica salve, and this was by far my most complicated recipe because A, I did it entirely by myself for the first time. I got some direction prior to from Zoraida, but I did most of it by myself. And then secondly, it's a two-step process. So first you need to make the Arnica oil. So you get all these different oils and Arnica flowers, you incorporate them together, you let it sit for about 4 to 6 weeks, you strain out the flowers, and then you make the salve. To do this, you incorporate the oil with the beeswax, you put it over low heat, and then you pour it into these little jars, and it totally looks like liquid. You're like, oh no, did I do this right? And then 2 hours later you come back and it's totally hardened, and yeah. So I made that here. You can't really see, but it's totally like Arnica salve, so it's kind of cool. Okay, the last point. So, this is called chaparral. Its official name is Laurelia trenundata. Its alternate names are chrysote bush, greasewood, and higuandilla. Chaparral is one of the most widespread and important medicinal herbs of the Southwest. It's a flowering plant in the Zyophilia family. And it's very versatile and can withstand even the most extreme conditions of the southwestern American and Mexican deserts. Visually, it's very distinctive. It's an evergreen shrub, and it either grows in a cone shape or a hemisphere shape. And it's got an extremely potent odor. So the potent odor resembles chrysote. Chrysote is a category of carbonaceous chemicals derived from plant decay, and is typically used as a preservative when storing food. And so because because chaparral has this smell, it's what gives it the common English name of chrysote bush. And the even more notable Spanish name, higuandilla, which literally means smelly. So now you have a plant named smelly, which is kind of cool. Yeah, so medicinally speaking, chaparral is used particularly as a first aid plant for infection. It's so you can incorporate into salves and poultices. It's also kind of growing more important in capsule form. So capsule form is important because capsules diminish the strong outward potency of the plant in raw form, but they still maintain the healing properties of the plant. So capsules are a really popular option for those with sensitive taste buds. And then kind of in culinary regard, chaparral is used for its preservative qualities. Because of its correlation to chrysote, people extract the powerful antioxidant and VGA from the plant and use it to combat spoiling. So this practice prevailed between the 1930s and 60s, but in the 1970s, the FDA officially discontinued its use in food preservation, and so some people continue to do it under the table, but it's kind of illegal. All right, so history. So chaparral is widely revered as one of the most important medicinal plants of the Southwest. The indigenous tribes recognized the healing properties of chaparral and incorporated into a variety of different medicines. They made teas, tinctures, and tonics from the leaves to treat common respiratory ailments. They made salves and liniments from leaf nodes, which were used to soothe bruises and cuts. And they made infusions of dried leaves and raw honey to treat gastrointestinal infections. And then the Southwest tribes also recognized the non-medicinal properties of chaparral and used the plant as feed for livestock, thatching for roofs, and adhesive for mending tools, pottery, and weapons. So then along came the Spanish settlers, going back to kind of your remonstrance on Osha. They didn't have any prior experience with this plant either, so they totally incorporated just indigenous traditions. And they kind of made liquid medicines, which would mean kind of incorporating the herb with kind of liquids, which we consume orally, and these are used to kind of treat more infection-based. And then they also made kind of remedies in solid form, such as liniments, salves, and creams to treat external injuries. And now modern day. So chaparral continues to be well regarded as a medicinal plant. The most important part is the leaves. So they're the best. They're the most potent part medicinally. Chaparral ointment is really effective treatment for treating staph and fungal infections. And in addition to its wide usage within homeopathic and herbal traditions, chaparral is now being incorporated into the more standardized medicine of the West. So there's a chaparral leaf extract, which is currently available in most pharmacies, and it's really good for STDs, especially herpes. And there's also supplements available and capsules available. And also, right now, scientists are currently researching the antioxidant properties of NBGA. It turns out that this may have anti-cancer properties, and so that's what scientists are currently investigating. Okay, my last remedy. So I made a chaparral tincture. Tincture was the one thing I hadn't really made yet. It's basically like making an infusion, but it's just alcohol-based as opposed to water-based. You just incorporate the plant with alcohol. And I made this right here. It's got vodka all over it, so if there's vodka all over my hand, it's kind of funny. But also not funny. Anyway, okay, so I totally made it like just a week ago, so I haven't strained it out yet, but eventually I'm going to strain it out, strain the herbs out, and just be left with the alcohol base. Okay, so with that, we've finished the herbalism notebook, guys. But before I let you go, I just want to give you a few concluding thoughts on just kind of this whole project and experience. I will say, prior to embarking on this project, I was like, oh, this will just be like a couple month long project. Maybe I can even get it done like before Christmas or something. Not true. Because this is, first of all, it was like a long project, but also it's a lifelong project. It's not something you just limit to like a month or a year or even 2 years. It's a total project that I think I'm going to like continue for the rest of my life, and the skills that I've learned over the course of these past 6 months, I'm going to carry with me forever wherever I go, because again, it's all about forging that personal connection with the plants, and that's something you just don't erase. It's like you don't forget the connections you make with people, you don't forget the connections you make with plants. And I'm sure as I go along my journey, there'll be some periods where I'm like more invested in it, I'll be like making herbal medicines, and there'll be some periods where I'm just like taking a nice walk in the garden and I'm like, oh yeah, I recognize you. But anyway, it's just been a really, really wonderful experience, and I'm so grateful for all the help that I've received along the way from my mentors, from Mr. Ryan for inspiring me, from my parents, who tried all my herbal remedies, my classmates too, who also tried them, and who just showed a lot of support. So, yeah, all right, we're finally finished. So I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to ask for questions if anyone like wants to hear my voice anymore. Yeah. Okay, Dini.
In your opinion, which one of your tinctures, creams, salves, etc., your pharmaceuticals, do you think was the most effective, and do you think was the least effective?
Wow. Okay. Well, I didn't really get to talk about this one, but I made this lavender rose face cream, and I made this remedy with Kais, and it was like, other than the infusions I had made, which were like fully tea-based, and it's like, they just don't look as visually attractive. I mean, they totally are a remedy, but I just remember this was a really big step, because it was like, wow, I actually made a cream that's a total face cream, and it totally feels like a face cream, and it feels like you could buy it in the store, so I totally feel like this one was pretty, I like this one a lot. I have to say that the Elderberry Syrup really totally tasted like cough syrup, so that was kind of cool to be like, whoa, I made cough syrup. And I feel like that was pretty effective. As for the non-effective ones, I can't really say that yet. I'm really curious to see how the tincture works out.
because I totally blew that at the very last minute, but I can't say if it's effective yet or not. Yeah. Ida?
Have you ever tried to cure minor illnesses with your medicines? Like your colds or anything?
Well, I have used things like when I'm feeling sick, I put a little bit of the Osha root honey, or I've had a little, or I've had I've made some teas and stuff. But I'm like definitely not a practiced herbalist yet, so I feel like I can't really like diagnose that stuff. I'm just trying my things on myself, you know. So, yeah. Miss Barney?
What does the rose elixir taste like?
It tastes exactly how you would imagine roses to taste like. I don't know another way to explain it like that, but it just tastes as beautiful as roses smell and as they look. So yeah. Yes, Ms. Reynolds?
For someone who wanted to maybe like start learning about this in any way or start incorporating some of these things into their life, where would be your first, like, where would you direct them to begin?
Actually, the books that you gave me were a really good starting place because they tell you they provide this like basically what I was trying to do with the herbalist notebook. They just give you a little bit like here's a like scientific background so you like get a connection with it, and then it tells you some herbal remedies and you just try to start from there. So I mean, I would honestly that's kind of what helped me get on the path. And again, it's all about the personal connection. So you definitely want to get the plant in your life. Yeah. Mr. Ryan.
So, are you planning to study the plants in Scotland since you're looking at regional plants here? Would you also look at regional plants there, and how do you imagine that happening?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to do that because it's totally different plants over there, and yeah. So of course, I'm not taking a class in the school or whatever, but I'm just gonna like probably go about the method worked for me where I have some books and then I also like do my own personal thing that like really was effective method for me, and maybe I could meet someone over there who could help me out. But yeah, I definitely want to learn about the plants wherever I go. So after Scotland, maybe I move, I don't know, somewhere else and then learn about the plants there. So that's what I'm talking about being like a lifelong project, that wherever you go, you forge more connections with the plants, and then suddenly you're like, the end of your life, and you're like, well, I know some plants in the Southwest, there's some plants in Scotland, whatever. So yeah.